That's cool.
I've resumed the recording now. Just
I
so
love
you
when
know.
Chris popped up. It was really shocking. I didn't know he was there. It was like, this is what you do.
Yeah, it's good to know he's looking over our shoulder, isn't it? To
International.
take care of us.
International
Yeah, who's that?
That's Chris.
Is it?
Yeah.
Wow.
Mysterious.
Actually, there is a way you can change your name on this in the participants section. Why you'd want to, I don't know, but yeah.
I changed mine.
Well, you can change it to Krug. Honji is pretty cool. Maybe I could do Warner A. It doesn't have the same ring to it.
Oh, I can rename you, Annette, actually. So just behave.
Stepping on thin ice, John.
Good. Right, Gordon.
Right.
You're in charge.
Oh dear.
I'm going to shut up.
Okay. I think so. This is our quorum then. That's good. It's good enough. Let me see. So let's see if I can not be too much of a boomer about this. Ooh. So we've decided, or the panel decided to have a theme title for this, Human Monster, or Human Stroke Monster, with the emphasis being on the stroke, really. But what connects and what divides these two ideas. And it was quite interesting. These things really emerged naturally and actually also resonate really well with Amy's work. So, will we be back? Is that gone now? Okay. So we're going to be doing it in that order, just as we did it before. 3 presentations, and then Amy, the discussant, will respond, and hopefully there'll be a panel discussion and open to the floor for questions after that as well. So, Bianca, are you here?
Hello.
Ah, hello. So do you want to take over the screen then?
Yeah. All right. Okay. Can everybody see?
Yeah.
Okay. So for those who don't know, I'm a painter. I mainly do acrylic paintings. So my work is about my childhood memories and kind of taking like the trivial everyday moments in life and kind of exploring them using the cartoon language to kind of elevate the emotion present. And in regards to today's theme with, monster and human, I kind of specified on 3 paintings. So I'm going to look at 3 in particular that I think fit the most to this theme. So this is the first one, pool lamps, and in brackets, submechanophobia. And I only recently discovered the term for this fear that I had as a kid. So it's actually quite fit, the timing is perfect. So submechanophobia is basically the fear of submerged man-made objects. And as a kid, I used to be really scared of pool lamps for whatever reason. And so I decided to paint a picture of it. And to me, the lamp was the monster. But in this painting, I kind of played around with that. And it looks like I'm the monster rather than the lamp, because the lamp is quite still. So I was kind of playing with that a bit. Second piece is me reacting to a cockroach, because nobody likes cockroaches. surprising you in your living room. And the final one is a kind of series of events all kind of compressed into one narrative of when I ran into a door and needed stitches for it. So it's kind of like playing with emotions at the same time while just throwing a bunch of things, and like, you know, the actual memory being kind of, you know, traumatizing or horrifying, but putting it in a kind of comedic light through this imagery. So playing on like, what is the monster in the actual thing, and what is it to be human, to react to certain events in your life. And I don't really know how else to say it. I can definitely elaborate more later with like questions and stuff, but yeah, that's kind of my work at the moment.
Yeah, okay. So do you want to take the screen down then?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, you had quite a few ideas in the discussions. This will come out later in the group discussion, I think.
Yeah.
The connections are really interesting. So it's Chiara next. And also, by the way, for video, when someone puts a video on, it's quite useful for your to hide your thumbnails, to sort of like get them out the way completely rather than move them around. It's just a little thing that you can scroll over at the top. That's just for the audience so you can see the videos more clearly. Okay, Chiara, do you want to take the stage?
Yes, please. Hi, I just get the settings right. So it's share computer sound, and there we go. I'll start off by showing you the video that I did for my final piece. Okay, and then I've got a few slides as well. So I think within my practice, I've been looking at the kind of boundaries between the wild and civilization, and the kind of narratives and crafts that occur at these boundaries. And I'm kind of interested in the mythological narratives that talk about humans kind of going into wild spaces and encountering these really scary monsters that actually, they kind of turn out to be your own primal selves that you have to kind of confront. And also, there's also stories about humans trying to surpass their own immortality and try and rival the gods. So with this in mind, I wanted to talk about the story of Arachne from Greek mythology. So in some stories, she's an orphan and she learns all the skills from women in her community, and they teach her how to sew, how to weave, how to cook, all in like a way to kind of make her more marriageable because she doesn't have a dowry. But she becomes really good at weaving, and she gets these really rich patrons from all over the known world, and they ask her to make works telling their victories and the wars that they've won. And they all say to her, wow, you're so amazing, you must have been blessed from Athena, because she's the goddess of craft. And Arachne's like, well, no, it's not down to the goddess at all. Like, if the gods were just, I'd still have my parents. I'm good at this because I've practiced and because the women took their time to teach me. Athena, hearing this, is like, well, that's very disrespectful. And she comes down and she challenges Arachne to a weaving competition. So they both sit down into adjacent looms and they start weaving out these stories. And Athena's is of like the victories of the gods, like Zeus beating the Titans, Athena earning her namesake for the city of Athens, whereas Arachne's talking about all the weird things that the gods do to the mortals, the fraught relationships, so like Zeus's like sexual abuse of loads of women, and Athena turning people into monsters. So it's quite a challenging piece for a mortal to do against a god. And at the end of the competition, it's clear that Arachne's won, but nobody wants to say it because no one wants to upset the goddess. But she does get upset anyway, rips the tapestry, beats Arachne and tries to make her submit. But Arachne won't. She was saying that she hangs herself from a noose because she'd rather die on her own terms than have to submit to a goddess. But Athena's like, well, no, that's not going to happen. You will live on, and you will live on and hang. And she transforms her from a person into this really hideous monster with black hair all over her and limbs that erupt from her stomach. And she becomes the first spider. And she's doomed to weave in dark shadows, isolated from her human community, and she's robbed of her humanity. And I thought those themes are quite interesting and kind of relate in a way to my own work. But yeah, that's me, and I've done a bit of craft myself, so I kind of relate to the story and how the matrilineal knowledge has been passed on. But yeah, shall I stop screen sharing now?
Okay, yeah. Okay, thanks for that.
Okay.
And we can already see these connections, cockroaches and spiders, private myths and ancient myths. Anyway, we can return to this. I'll try and shut up. Lily, where are you?
Hello.
Hello, I'll just mute myself.
So I'm not going to talk about my themes right now. I'll just show my video to start with, which is 10 minutes long, and then we can discuss it afterwards in the panel discussion. Share computer sound. Okay, so yeah, that was it.
Hello. Okay, great. Oh, Bianca, you're back. Great. Lost connection, apparently. Okay, I mean, now we're going to go over to Amy. I mean, the idea of this panel was to put, you know, to watch everything like one after the other and to think of them as a whole, and to, you know, return to some of the themes individually as we proceed in the discussion. I think the themes you can kind of really see working. Anyway, over to you, Amy. Sorry, was that give you a shock then?
I was just on mute. I completely forgot. Thanks, Gordon. Yeah, yeah, thank you all for showing your work. It was really great to see what you chose to present. And yeah, good to have you talk a little bit about the work as well. I thought maybe we could start the discussion with kind of some more general questions, and then maybe I could go into more specifics about each piece, and maybe we could discuss yeah, some more direct questions for that. But yeah, I thought kind of going off the back of the panel we've just had, we were talking quite a lot about lockdown, and I was kind of interested to hear from each of you how you felt kind of that lockdown, the coronavirus has affected kind of the way you make work, I guess.
I don't know if I can respond now.
Yeah, just jump in.
Go for it.
Well, at WSA, I was based in the sculpture studio. So my practice was mostly sculptural, and even though I still kind of really enjoyed film, and I filmed a lot of the sculptural processes, and always really enjoyed the outcome of the kind of the film of the moving sort of materials whilst I was making them, but never actually kind of really made much film. I always focused on the sculpture. But being in lockdown and realizing that actually that I don't have all the space and the facilities that I'm normally working with, I think film was a kind of more obvious medium then to decide to use instead of sculpture, because I was initially planning on making, I was planning for my final major project to make a sort of sculptural installation, which maybe would have had some film in it, but that wasn't necessarily going to be the main focus. So kind of adapting to a digital audience and a digital way of showing and working on my work. Definitely film has become a much kind of a better medium to use in this environment for me.
I think I was quite lucky with the lockdown because I was able to move back home before it all happened, and I live in like the Forest of Dean, so for my film it worked out really well because I had quick and easy access to get down into these like kind of secluded wooded areas for my film. And in terms of making, like obviously I really miss like the print workshop because I had to do some home printing which went really badly. And other things like with the costume and with the quilt, they were kind of, because they're craft, they're kind of stuff that you could do anywhere, just like kind of folded up in your lap. So I was quite lucky in that sense as well because I'd already had the materials. It was just a thing of like making it and spending time on it. So I was quite lucky, but I did also have to kind of move towards the digital towards the end. I did a bit of animation, which was a bit of a risk, but it's okay. I'm glad I did it. Lockdown kind of pushed me to try and use software. So that's kind of a blessing, I think.
Bianca, did you have anything you wanted to say about
I'm sorry. No, yeah, I think I've also been quite lucky because I'm painting, so for me it wasn't too difficult to do anything. So like all of this in the background is stuff I did during lockdown on like small canvases and cardboard pieces. For my final major project though, I had really large canvases in mind planned originally, so I couldn't do that, but I was luckily able to bring some bits of canvas back home, and I managed to do a piece 120 by 120, which is one of the pieces I showed in the slides earlier. So yeah, I think in terms of scale wise, I was still lucky enough to, you know, be flexible with that. But because a lot of my painting I did in my room, it was a bit difficult to paint more expressively. So being more broad with my brush strokes and to kind of make it more abstract. So a lot of the work that I've been doing recently is a bit more solid in terms of shapes and colors and mark making compared to the work that I was doing while I was in the CO.
Yeah, that's really interesting to hear, because obviously, like, if you know, if this hadn't happened, we'd probably be seeing your work in kind of real life in a show. Yeah, and I've been it's something I've been thinking quite a lot about, the kind of potential for this kind of quite challenging time to, like, you know, maybe enact positive change. And I've been finding it really interesting. You know, I think I, like you guys, have been kind of moving towards the digital in terms of producing work, but it's quite curious as like a viewer or like an audience as well to like start to experience work that way as well. Like, I've been looking at like Instagram art a lot more, and like when I was preparing to like see your guys' work, I like looked at your Instagrams because I was like, I want to get a sense of, like, get context for like what you're doing and like where you've come from with the work. But yeah, so it's been interesting to hear about like the positives and negatives you've experienced. And I guess kind of like leading on from that, I was wondering, like the work that you've chosen to show today, like how like typical you would say it is of the work you make. And that's something that I kind of quite like to ask, just because you know, work can change so quickly, like from last year to this year to like pre-WSA to now. So yeah, if you could just say something about like how typical you feel the work is of you.
For me, it was very typical. I don't think I had to I don't have to change much about the subject matter. I mean, I sometimes I do bring in stuff that is a bit more contemporary than others, like in terms of memories that I've been using, but I haven't really had to change anything drastically, which is quite interesting in a way, but also it's like assuring because like I didn't have to change anything, but it's also like the situation that I've been put in kind of made me think about like what I could change and what new things I could incorporate in the future.
Well, Bianca, did your exhibition proposal seemed to change your certainly the way you thought about the context of your work.
Yeah. Should I bring it up? Like,
yeah, I think that'd be interesting.
So for my exhibition proposal, because I literally had no clue where to put my work, I just kind of instinctively was like, what about the National Gallery? And I kind of really badly edited. I can get them on a slide, hold on.
Yeah, to see.
I really like badly edited of my work in the National Gallery.
Oh wow.
Hold on, there we go. Just to kind of see how it would look, and of course there were a lot of mixed feelings at first. I was like, the colors, there's too much colors, but at the same time it's like, oh, that's actually quite an interesting observation and contrast to the work that's already there, and also like the kind of links that I could have made with the actual work exhibited in terms of like genre painting, for example, and kind of the daily life explored during that time, and then the daily life I explore of my time, which is obviously more contemporary, different time. So it's really fun to play with that, and that was an interesting contrast to the context of putting it in WSA.
It kind of works with the like the cartoon language of it quite well. Like, it's kind of like it makes me think of in cartoons where they go to like a big gallery and you see all these like ridiculous versions of paintings you might expect to see. Yeah. I think it's really fun.
It also puts your work on these private myths, you know, these childhood traumas, little everyday traumas turn into this kind of grand mythical context, you know, where suddenly it's not Judith's head being cut off. It's, you know, you going to the dentist.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to? Should we get out? You want to take off the? There you go.
Yeah. Do you guys have anything to say about how typical the work is of you?
For me, my work, I mean, so normally it's sculpture based, like I've said already, but compared to Bianca's work, for example, it's like Bianca's got quite a clear language that her work kind of follows. It's consistent and easy to recognize. One of her paintings is one of hers, but throughout my time at WSA, I've not kind of, my practice has never sort of stuck with a consistent like medium or visual kind of language that is recognizable, I'd say, but definitely thematically it's still addressing a lot of the same things as other work that I've just tackled from a completely different point of view and different media and approach, really, I think. So it's been an interesting shift of approach to tackle the same topics and subjects.
Yeah, I think I'm in a similar position to Lily. I think thematically I've stayed quite consistent. I think I've also stayed quite consistent in the way that I approach things. It's definitely still very craft-based, very making things with my own hands to then put into, to then use as props to tell narratives. I don't think lockdown really changed that with me. I think I'm quite inflexible, which is maybe not great quality.
Oh, that's great to hear. And I guess I also was wondering, because when we had the alumni speaking, a lot of people had kind of threads they'd taken from WSA going onwards, and I was wondering, you know, is there anything that you feel like WSA has changed for your work or might do going forwards?
I think WSA, I think the print workshop, I think I fell in love with it as soon as I came there.
Yeah, I still missed it.
I really miss the print workshop. Printing from home is a bloody nightmare because I don't have any press. I got ink, so I'll try, I'm going to try and make a press in the next couple of weeks, but it's just like being dropped out of the air. Like when you're at WSA, you've got like the whole like you're kind of cradled by all the facilities. You can do kind of anything, and you can talk to anyone, and they can kind of get you on further and kind of solve your problems. So I think, yeah, it's hard. It's hard being away from the community, I think.
I think that when you graduate though, you can, you know, it does take some time, but you can kind of start to build new communities, and yeah, there's often, even if it's like just really small, like local things.
Yeah.
Like I'm not with the London Print Studio still because I don't live near there anymore. I'm in South London. But there's kind of like there's like a local collective that has like a print every week. They have like a print thing, and it's like quite lo-fi, but it's just nice to see other people and like Kezia was saying, like expand your network.
Yeah.
I think for me, in terms of things that I've started doing at WSA that I'll definitely be taking forward is using kind of found objects and sort of reclaimed materials and like the resilience to just sort of collect sort of stuff and find things and be resourceful to sort of get your hands on what you can in terms of art materials and seeing things that aren't typically considered as art materials and use them in creative ways, I think, and the confidence to do that on a maybe larger sculptural scale is something that I guess I did for the first time at WSA, which I hope to continue to do coming out of lockdown and
Yeah, and also I think being in a studio with peers is something that really changed my experience, I think, because when I do art, I usually do it in my room when I'm alone, no one else. And so like being in a studio where you can do anything and you have different people doing different things, you always get inspired by what others are doing. I think that's one of the most important things that I've picked up. And also like just what you can achieve in a studio. So like the space that you have and the different places you can go and display your work, like just the experimentation that it allows is really good. Yeah, it's a good thing that I picked up.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things I miss most about both my BA and MA is the shared studio space. And you know, like I was saying, I had a studio this past year, but because everyone's always at work, no one's there. So you kind of get like a little bit of it, but it's not quite the same. But I think it's such an valuable experience. And you can definitely get kind of like, you know, versions of that going forward. But yeah, I think having like a peer group so useful. Something that I've been finding really useful during lockdown is like a group of fellow graduates from Slade. We do like a Zoom crit once a week, which is really nice. And yeah, I'd recommend, you know, maybe thinking about, you know, starting a crit group, and it doesn't need to be an intense crit. Like it's not a scary one that we do. It's like, you know, oh, you know, I made this bit of video. Maybe you can look at it and people point out really obvious stuff, and like, you know, it's helpful, and also good to do it with people that you know that you feel comfortable with. So yeah, that's definitely something that I'd, you know, recommend thinking about what kind of structures you can put in place when you leave to help. I don't know, I really find structure helpful, but like things that can help with you to continue making work and that fit around, you know, like your kind of like real life, like, you know, the paid work and the things that you have to do, and family commitments and things like that. And I think that's one thing that this lockdown's been really interesting for, is like opening up video meetings in a way. Like I'd never really had a video meeting before this, and I think it can be a good way to fit things in. So yeah, so going on from that, I do want to go into like more specifics about each of your works, because I think they're so interesting, and a lot of them touch on themes that are very like, I'm fascinated with animals and like depictions of animals and like cartoon language, so I'm really excited to talk about that. But I thought before we get into like kind of individual work, I'd really be interested to know a bit more about like your thinking on this theme of like the human monster, and I was quite taken by what Gordon said about like the dash being quite important, and that kind of, yeah, that stroke between the two. Yeah, so if you just had something to say about that, that'd be really interesting.
Yeah, before I was doing autobiographical work, I was actually looking at fairy tales more. And so this is why I kind of link a bit with Chiara in terms of looking at narratives from fairy tales and folk tales, and kind of the fantasy of things. And you know, that's where like monsters come in. And the transition from me doing fairy tales to my current work is actually fears and like the things that I was afraid of. So I was looking at cartoons that I used to be afraid of, and then that's when I kind of looked at other fears, and then it kind of seeped into just generally life experiences. So I think like a lot of things to do with what we consider a monster, or what we are afraid of, or generally like what is human, what is monster, like the kind of distinguishing factors is like very interesting.
Yeah, I think I kind of followed on from a similar sort of train to Bianca, because obviously I'm really interested in like narratives, and how like the monsters in our narratives are like really scary, like kind of beasts that are like wild and untamable. But then when you like, usually when you go on through the story, it just becomes a part of yourself that you have to confront, like a thing that you don't like about yourself that is you scared of. So again, that's kind of linking into like the fear that Bianca's talking about. And like within my own research, I kind of like picked up on like folk rituals, where when people want to get closer to nature, they kind of dress up as these monsters in order to feel more connected to the landscape. So they're dressing up as these really scary things to try and connect to a landscape that they are kind of a bit scared of because it's unknowable and it's like uncontrollable. And I think that was quite a key thing, becoming a monster to connect with the land.
Thinking to what Chiara said about kind of in traditional fairy tales and mythologies, there being a representation of a monster, but actually kind of maybe realizing that the monster is what Chiara was saying about finding stuff within yourself, within a human that is monstrous. That is a kind of a way that I would relate the theme to my work, in that the title of my film is We Are Animals, and I'm kind of commenting on humans and how monstrous humans can be and how sort of inhumane humans are in terms of their treatment of animals. And that's, yeah, that kind of like humans being kind of monstrous and doing monstrous things and having the capacity to do that, and behave in that way, and that being an integral part of humanity as well, I suppose. But then also, yeah, the title also is about humans, like we are animals, as in humans and man. We're animals as well. I think I can hear myself. I don't know if anyone else can hear. Okay, I think that's gone. Yeah, humans being animals closely related to them should be able to empathize and relate to animals, and yet we do these monstrous things in an animalistic kind of way. So yeah, that'd be my response.
Yeah, oh, thank you. Yeah, no, I thought maybe we could do more. Maybe I'll do you guys in like the order that you showed in. So we'd start with Bianca, and yeah, go into like a bit more depth about what you've just said, because it's really interesting, like your personal response to that theme and kind of what your work's exploring. Yeah, so is it right if we start with you, Bianca? Yeah, okay. Yeah, so the thing that really took me with your work, because I was looking at it on Instagram before today as well, was like that cartoon language that you have, and that like relationship to the cartoon, and like the way that kind of through painting it, it's almost like elevating that language. And that kind of struck me particularly with the National Gallery setting. I really like that. And yeah, I was wondering, I guess, what your relationship, maybe if you could say a bit more about your relationship to it, or like more broadly your relationship to like pop culture, and yeah, what your thoughts are behind kind of using it within your paintings.
Yeah, I'm very connected to pop culture. Like, I really love cartoons. Like, I have a lot of nostalgia and good connections with like my childhood cartoons, and I watch a lot of animated films today, and I just really like the kind of cartoon language and like the flexibility that it has and the fun aspects of it, and like how you can communicate so much with so little through visual language like that. And I think before I kind of really started my practice, like around like sixth form, I was doing kind of semi-realistic pastel drawings, and my teacher just randomly said, oh, why don't you look at something new? And then I looked at Dana Schutz's work, and it was like a complete transformation for me, because I was always so fixated on like, okay, art is about making it look realistic, making it look nice. And so this kind of idea of just going to town and drawing these kind of cartoony looking figures was something really new for me, and it was really exciting, you know. And so because I could also connect that with, you know, fairy tales and cartoons and the kind of unrealistic otherly world, it was just something really fun for me. And I just continued doing that, and it was really enjoyable. And I just like continued to find different ways where I can just play with that cartoon language, because it doesn't have any limitations. You can really go anywhere with it, and you can play so much with it in a way where it doesn't have to be like perceived as innocent, if that makes sense. Like a lot of connections is like, oh, it's very fun and innocent, but you can also have a lot of dark undertones with it. So you can really go anywhere with it, which is really why I like to use it.
Yeah, I think you didn't. I don't think you showed it in your presentation, but my favorite one is of the injection, the butt injection. It made me laugh. I love the eyes going up. But yeah, I was wondering, have you seen? It really reminded me of not in terms of the way the kind of the paintings, but the kind of the kind of way you're addressing the cartoon language reminded me a lot of. Do you know Andy Holden's work? He did a video piece called Laws of Motion in a Cartoon Landscape.
Okay.
I'll put any references I'll put in the chat later, just so you have like the spelling and everything. But yeah, it's really he kind of has created this video where he takes like mainly from like Looney Tunes and stuff like that kind of era of cartoons, and he kind of divides kind of the cartoon land into different laws of physics, which is like kind of imposing order on something that can seem quite chaotic and seem kind of orderless. So that might be something interesting. I was just wondering if you'd seen it, but if not,
No, I haven't.
Might be good.
I'll check it out.
Yeah, it's quite long, but it is very fun. And kind of going on from that, you talked about narrative and the importance of narrative in the work, and I was wondering about kind of particularly in relation to cartoons, but then also in relation to self-portraiture, how important is kind of truth to the narrative, or is it more about the fiction of the narrative? Because a lot of these paintings are about personal things that have happened.
I think in terms of that, it's kind of ambiguous in a way, like it's up to the viewer, because I obviously, like, I know what happened or what I think happened, because a lot of these experiences are kind of fuzzy memories from my childhood. So the extent of whether something really happened the way it did is always up in the air. And I think that's like a fun way to play with it. But it's also kind of like up to the viewer and their experiences, whether they can relate to it, and then kind of how they can to deduce from their personal experiences, whether they think like, oh, this is something that I can see happening or something that I think is completely ridiculous. But because it's also in a cartoon language, the idea of it being ridiculous is also just kind of obvious. It's kind of there already. So there's a lot of suggestions, I think, for that.
Yeah, definitely. In terms of like your relationship to portraiture as well, I guess, like, do you think you'd ever kind of do these portraits of other people, or is it very much something that's kind of personal to you, and it needs to be you in the paintings?
No, it doesn't have to be me. I just kind of started doing myself on a whim, but I think it would be interesting to expand it to other people as well, because I'm not the only one with weird experiences. And I think it'd be quite fun to do more larger kind of narratives with more things going on rather than just the central figure, but also like switching back and forth. Like I like to keep it quite versatile in terms of what I can look at. So yeah, I think in the future it would be quite nice to collect experiences as well and see from what I would interpret and then what they would interpret from it, and just see like how it would become a new thing as well.
Yeah, and I guess obviously like portraiture has this like historical relationship to painting. And do you think that that's something that like, 'cause obviously you're a painter, but do you think that that's important that these exist as paintings?
Yeah, I think so, because I mean, even like with past paintings, you see a lot of different kind of interpretations of humans through portraiture, whether it's actually like from a real person or just something from imagination. So this is kind of linking to like Hieronymus Bosch's work and his imagination and his fantasy of things that were obviously not real, but like putting that in a kind of visual perspective. So I think painting in terms of what you see and what you perceive to see is quite important. And even now, like I think it's kind of vital to like who we are and like as people, and kind of seeing different people's relationships and reaction towards like us as people as well through portraiture.
Yeah. And because I'm not a painter, so it's not my speciality at all, but I was I noticed that you use acrylic in a lot of them. Is that something that you would normally use and work with? And do you tend to work like in this kind of like more analog way, like on canvas, or would you ever kind of work in a like kind of digital painting?
Yeah, I mainly do acrylic. Well, I sometimes use oil as well, but I've recently done more acrylic because of how quick I can work with it and like less cleaning up I have to do. I have done digital drawings. It was actually during first year because of our studio space limitations. I kind of found my way through Microsoft Paint, being this kind of really crappy digital software, and I did a lot of like drawings on there, and I had a lot of fun. But like after moving to the painting studios, where I was like, okay, really interested in painting again, and then I kind of not touched any of my digital stuff, but I still have like a really fun time digital drawing when I do have the opportunity to do so.
Oh yeah, that's really good to hear about. Yeah, no, because I just thinking about the painting and you know, the different forms of it. Because I was your work kind of reminded me. I don't know. There's a ceramicist called Charlotte May, who has like a really like this really fun approach to painting ceramics that you might find interesting. I'll type up at the end of the session. I'll type up all the references I've done and I'll put it for all of you guys, just for ease. And then it also made me think of Yoshitomo Nara, who's like represented by Pace Gallery. Yeah, like I like the expressions. I think, reminded me of that. And yes, I wondered if you could maybe say about a little about who your kind of influences are, like who your main influences are.
No, Yoshitomo Nara is quite a big influence, especially in the very early stages of my work. Another Japanese artist as well, Ayako Rokaku. She does these really colorful paintings with her hands, so it's very like kind of organic even. Geneva Ellis, Dana Schutz, George Kondo as well to an extent. I think those are like the main ones, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, and kind of expanding on that. I know you've talked about this a lot already, but like maybe kind of like more broadly, like what would you say your interests are in relation to like art and like what you kind of are trying to I guess express is the wrong word, but like what are your interests, I suppose.
I really like colorful work. Like I just really love color when people can just manipulate it in such ways that it just moves you. And also I guess humor. Like I really love just looking at a painting and being able to have so much joy from it. So like in terms of my own work and what I look for in like other artists, well, I mean, yeah, when I look at other work, like I really love when it's like colorful or something that is really eye-catching. But at the same time, I really have this appreciation for work that is very simple as well, like very minimalistic. So it's a bit like all over the place for me. But yeah, I would say definitely I lean more towards really colorful work or work that is like about humor. And of course, very cartoony art. Like I really like that kind of stuff.
Oh, yeah, thank you. So yeah, it's been really interesting talking to you about the work. And I guess just to like round up, like where do you kind of want the work to go next, I suppose? Where do you see it going, like ideally, or
I don't know. I'm kind of like, I haven't really thought about it that much at the moment. Kind of a lot of things are going on, but I think I'll just continue and see where it takes me, like trying different things. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's probably like you can never plan too much. I think you can just see how it goes, and often opportunities appear. Or yeah, no, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Kiara, is it right for you?
Hi.
Sorry, I've made notes, so let me just find what I've written. I really enjoyed your video. I was really interested in the kind of like that boundary between like nature and culture, I really got that kind of what you kind of that reference to like mythologies through it. And it made me like, it really reminded me of kind of like you know, like those odd like British kind of like folklore traditions you get. And 'cause I know you said quite a lot about kind of like Greek mythology, and I was wondering whether like kind of more like local mythology played a role in kind of the work you make.
Oh, definitely. Like the music that I used was directly from like a Morris Men performance that I
Okay.
went to, because I live in quite a rural area, so Morris Men and like country dancing are kind of things that I grew up with, and they're the kind of like tame version of folk rituals that used to happen around here. And in terms of like the kind of vague mythology in my own work, it's kind of linking to the history of the Forest of Dean with like miners, and the way that like my community has used the landscape and we've kind of taken from it, and how now that that industry's over, it's kind of healing over itself. So it's linking to the kind of folk, kind of rural customs that my village takes part in, and also the community's history with the Forest of Dean.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I guess like, because obviously your work's kind of like quite process led and like material led, but would you also say that like that research is quite important?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I although like I'm focused definitely in on English folklore because it's something that I can kind of directly personally relate to. I kind of like mythology as a whole, as a way of like unifying ideas and kind of being able, you can communicate with anybody with it, because they all have like kind of similar tropes across cultures. And I think another aspect of folklore that I really like is that it's often like matrilineal. So it's like passed down from mothers to daughters, and a bit like the craft. So like, although I didn't learn any craft from my mum, I know that traditionally that is a matrilineal thing as well. So I thought that those two kind of paralleled.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess with we already talked with Bianca about like narratives. And I guess I'd ask the same thing like with your work, because obviously there is a lot with the myths, a lot of kind of like fiction in them, and but then with like the folklore, there's kind of like truth to kind of these traditional practices. Yeah, and I was wondering what your relationship to those kind of narratives was.
Well, I think with my work, I tried not to make too much of a strict narrative. I think because it's dealing with monsters and it's dealing with a wild landscape, you could never really pin it down too much. So I try and stick to just like narrative potential, like kind of making things and then putting them in the context of the woods and then seeing how it kind of speaks for itself, and maybe like sparks off a bit of a story in somebody else's head. Because I think with like mythology and folklore, they're kind of so generic that you kind of inherently know the way, the structure of it, the way that the story's going to end. So I think it's quite ingrained to make narratives out of anything. So instead of making a strict one, I just try and keep it vague so people can make their own stories.
Yeah, it kind of really reminded me of a couple of different kind of like performance artists. And part of the reason I asked about the narrative was because they kind of have this approach where it's like it's kind of like referred to as like fictioning, like kind of rebuilding these fictions and creating them into something else. But they might be, I don't know if you've heard of the kind of performance group called Plastic Fantastic. No, it might be interesting to look up. It's like the two main people are like David Burrows. The reason I know about it is because he teaches at the Slade, so I'd heard of them, but I'd never seen them perform till I went there. So it's like David Burrows and Richard O'Sullivan, and Simon O'Sullivan, and they have quite interesting texts on fictioning, and particularly in relation to folklore, that might be interesting to look at. And then there's another artist called Ariane Churchman who might be interesting to look up, because she kind of creates these video works. I think it was the costume that you made. I was very interested in like the aesthetic of the costume and like the materials you'd chosen to use, and the kind of like that kind of relationship between the quilt and then the kind of like the fabric costume.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was wondering, like, when you're kind of choosing materials to work with, what kind of decision making process do you have?
Well, with the costume, it's quite, I like tassels because it kind of mimics the movement of like animal fur, and it makes any movement that the performer does like kind of wild and unpredictable, because if you move your arm, the fur will then go and so the wool and tassely bits are very easy options. And I think with the quilt, I kind of, because it's a new practice for me, I kind of go off what expert quilters know. And so I picked quite traditional cottons for it. And then I printed on top, and then I've embroidered on top of that. So it's quite a layer of very traditional processes.
Yeah, because I was wondering about the printing on the quilt. What kind of printmaking were you using?
Woodcut. Sorry, I always get confused between woodblock and woodcut, but it's a woodcut. And then I used oil-based inks, which was in hindsight a bit of a mistake because it stinks.
Yeah.
But yeah, I like it because everything that I did with the quilt and with the costume is all made with my own hands. And I have this kind of thing that if you make something with your own hands, it's kind of like you're giving the physical object a bit of your own essence or energy. I don't know, it just seems a bit magic to me.
Yeah, I guess it kind of made me think about like that history that printmaking has with fabric, and yeah, particularly like kind of woodblock or woodcuts. The kind of that relationship was interesting. And then you're in the forest, so you get like all these nice.
You get the wood around it as well. Yeah.
And sorry, I'm just I guess kind of going back to my more generic questions perhaps, but like what do you think what would you say your kind of influences are, I guess?
Well, folklore's definitely a huge one. Rituals, and I think in terms of artists, I think like the more performative ones like Chetwynd and Marcus Coates.
Oh yeah, I love Marcus Coates.
Anything that's a bit magic or a bit harking back to ancient times kind of gets me excited. And of course, like raw landscapes, like things with like rugged bits of rock, or things where trees have grown over where a man-made object was. Anything kind of strikingly beautiful and powerful about nature.
And yeah, what would you say that your kind of like broad interests are in relation to the work? Again, I know you've already spoken a lot about this, but it's nice just to get kind of like a summary of your interests.
What in terms of like what I make and how?
Yeah, I guess in like what you think about and what you like to make work about, not necessarily what you've made work about, but kind of going on from the folklore, or maybe there's something that you want to research next.
Oh, there is something, I've forgotten the name of it. There's a specific ritual in Cornwall that I really like, and it's a person who dresses up, and it's kind of like a disc costume, and I think all the villagers kind of beat them, like mock beat them, and kind of send them off the cliff. But it's all like a game. I think for the next bit, I'm kind of interested in like old-timey children's games and like the rhymes that they used to say, because I've been doing a bit of research into Paula Rago and her nursery rhymes. And then at the same time I also kind of read this book about old children's games like hopscotch and the kind of origins around that. And I think that the like art of play and children is like something that I think is quite easy to connect with my work, because children often play as monsters, and they're very linked to the fairy tale. So I think trying to get into their mindset, or like looking at how they play, might be something to go on to.
Yeah, I think they're very linked, or can be perceived to be linked to the animal as well, which is like another nice kind of like meeting point, or like blurring of those.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that kind of links to Bianca's work as well, because obviously hers is all about like the child and like the fears and the memories, and how like when you're a child you're kind of like a little bit monstrous because you're still learning how to be a person.
Yeah, it makes me think of Lily's as well, with when you think about being an adult and whether it's possible to like become the animal anymore, and that kind of like disconnect you have from your childhood experiences.
Yeah, it's like there's like an invisible kind of barrier where we start to separate ourselves from the other, so we become human and everything else is other and different.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, thank you so much, Chiara. I'm aware that time is going by, but we'll get to Lily. Are we all right for time, Gordon?
We're still fine for time.
Okay.
Just gone 12:15, so we've got up until 1.
All right. Yeah, Lily, should we talk about your work?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess. Wait 1 moment. Yeah, I thought it was really interesting that you chose to kind of like just show the video, and then kind of let us kind of infer from that. I thought that was really interesting, and it was quite nice, because actually you didn't have that much work online, so I was kind of going in blind a bit more with your work, which is interesting in itself, I think, what you choose to put online and the way you kind of curate yourself. Yeah, so yeah, with the video, it made me, because I'm really interested in depictions of animals and the kind of like human-centric world that we exist in, and I think there's so much interesting writing about kind of yeah, addressing that, or thinking about humans not being the center of the universe, whether that's through thinking about objects or animals. So yeah, I was interested in maybe you could say something about kind of your kind of like thoughts about us in relation to the animal, because that felt really important to the video.
Well, yeah, I mean, so I've been reading about, I read a book called Eating Animals, and it was kind of like, I already knew a lot about the truth of industrial farming and how we exploit animals and stuff, but it was really eye-opening in terms of the industry and the different laws that are there to protect animals, and the way that just the way as a species that we view them, but also the fact that like we've got this weird confused view of animals in relationship to the animals that we eat, because as a nation, generally speaking, we love eating meat and animals, and we use a lot of animal products and things, but for most people the idea of actually having to kill an animal or seeing an animal being killed is also horrific. So there's this massive gap in our kind of conscious understanding or acceptance of the fact that we enslave animals to in order to be able to enjoy eating them, but we don't want to think about it. And I'm not a vegan or anything. I eat meat as well, so I'm not kind of trying to preach about that kind of thing with my work. I'm very much exploring it from a personal point of view and trying to figure it out myself, I think, because like Chiara, I've also grown up in quite a sort of a rural area with lots of countryside around me, and sort of seeing wild animals, and I really love kind of the natural environment, but feel a massive disconnect between the animals and the natural world, and then also to think about how we treat them in such an inhumane, or whatever that means, kind of way, is very disturbing. And initially in my practice, in terms of themes like objectification, I was thinking more about women and how women are objectified in our society. So it's kind of led on from that, and I read a book called The Pornography of Meat by Carol Adams, and that really nicely kind of connected those two themes for me in terms of our sort of patriarchal society where we objectify women, and then also objectify animals, and how there are actually some really, really strong links between that. And then also I'm interested in Christeva's theory of the abject, and how women are often, because of our ability to give birth and the maternal aspect of us, that we're considered to be on the side of nature and kind of monstrous in certain ways, and like the whole fear of menstruation and like the themes that came up in my film, like lactating breasts and all the rest of it, that is so kind of a lot of it's very taboo, and the kind of the whole female thing and the animal thing, just it feels like there's such strong links, and just, yeah, I guess exploring that kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah, because in my work I don't so much deal with that connection, but I have read the Pornography of Meat, which I think is really interesting. Yeah, and I guess the kind of yeah, the female body as like something natural, and the way the kind of like the, you know, all the discourse around a woman's body and what you can and cannot do. And I was reading actually an interesting article the other day about developments in like artificial wombs.
Okay.
And it was like I think it was in the Guardian, but it was like somewhere where they're it's like a kind of like a grow bag, and like they're using lambs. I guess that's the other interesting thing about animals, is their use in kind of scientific research, which is again, you know, obviously quite controversial. And yeah, so they were like growing these lambs in these like artificial wombs, and it kind of I thought it was interesting about thinking, you know, the way the animal was being used to potentially like affect women's bodies, you know, quite drastically, and in kind of, you know, it can be seen as a good thing, it can be seen as a bad thing, like, you know, potentially you wouldn't have to carry a child, which might be like more freeing in terms of you know, what's expected of you and your body. But then it also impacts like the way the fetus is seen, and just, you know, what's seen as a viable fetus. So it was quite interesting, not directly related to work, but just,
no, but that's fascinating. Yeah,
there's a lot of interesting dialogue around it, I think. Yeah, sorry, I've gotten lost thinking about the sheep and the artificial womb. Yeah, no, because I guess what you're saying about that disconnect we have with like mass farming, I often think about like the kind of like the abattoir as like this thing that we're like massively shielded from, and the way that even people who work in it, they work in like specific areas of it, so you don't kind of like experience that full kind of horror. And I guess with your work, it was very much, it's set in the natural world, but it did kind of like make me think about like the escaped animal, or it made me think about there's this book called The Plague Dogs that was by Richard Adams, so the guy who did Watership Down, but it's like it's like a much more like horrifying version of these like dogs that have escaped this testing facility in the Lake District. And they made like this this cartoon of it that's like it's like a PG, but it shouldn't be a PG. It's very disturbing.
Watership Down is really disturbing as well.
Oh, it's much worse. But yeah, it is. But yeah, like I know you touched about on like the themes you're looking at in terms of activism, and that you're not it's not about preaching about them. But what is maybe you could say a bit more about your relationship to that.
Well, yeah, I mean, I've been through various phases of kind of trying to be vegetarian. I generally kind of avoid dairy anyway because of the dairy industry being so kind of horrible, really. And so the meat that I do eat is like, I'm lucky that I live in a place where I can get meat from a farm that's kind of like 5 minutes up the road. So it's not industrial by any means. But at the same time, I don't know whether that's hypocritical in terms of what I'm saying, like fundamentally speaking, because like farming an animal is kind of exploiting it, whether you do it nicely or whether you do it on an industrial scale, I think. And at the end of the day, you're rearing that animal. It's been born in order for it to be eaten, essentially. And so it's interesting thinking about the intention behind farming and how we haven't evolved to farm like and other animals. There are a few other animals that farm slightly, but like insects and ants and aphids and stuff on a different scale. But yeah, it's a weird thing. And then I came across an article about the ethics of keeping pets, and I've been thinking about actually like lots of people have pets. Like I have a dog and I've had pets. I've grown up with them, but really it's this really strange kind of relationship that you have with this animal. It's kind of like you're keeping it in your house and it's there to sort of serve you, and you have it because you want it there. It's not there because it chose you, kind of thing in most situations. So it's kind of like caged, but then there's also this complex relationship where it loves you, obviously, like pets and owners have a very deep relationship a lot of the time. But then again, they've been bred, like kind of dogs have been bred and to be specifically tame, and a lot of the time like hypoallergenic, so they don't make their owners sneeze, and you know, it's very human centric. So like that whole thing is another discussion, but linked strongly as well. So yeah, just kind of questioning our fundamental relationship, humans, our relationship with animals, and how we can do that in a just way, whether it's possible to eat ethical meat or whether that's like a total fallacy in itself, and whether that doesn't, there's no way that can happen. Been thinking about things like that. And so the film itself, this animal that was in nature and is now in some kind of horrible, dark, cold, uncomfortable environment, the narrative in the film, the way that I saw it and the way that I was making it was that it was a metaphor, not for one specific animal, like a story of an animal, but a metaphor for how humans have taken something that is perfectly happy doing its own thing, living with its children and everything, to something that has been taken into a manufactured, man-made environment, and its children have been taken away so that we can drink its milk or whatever, make it more convenient for us. So that's what the film was kind of trying to get at, I suppose.
Yeah, I think I definitely got a sense of that. But then I think because you use the human body to kind of like represent that, or like there's hints that it is, you know, you've got the fur and the texture, but then there's also like senses of the human. It made me think a lot about kind of like the idea of like becoming animal. I don't know if you've read much around that. Have you read the Postmodern Animal by Steve Baker?
No, I haven't. Oh.
Yeah, that might be interesting. There's a chapter in that that's on becoming, and it's talking about talking about I can never say it right. Deleuze and Guattari. They're like philosophers, like continental philosophers, who their actual text on becoming is quite impenetrable, although it's worth like looking at. But Steve Baker in his book kind of has this chapter where he kind of breaks it down a little bit and kind of says some interesting things about that in relation to kind of contemporary art and some other artists who whose work reminds me a little bit of yours. There's this one artist, and I can't remember her name at all, but she's a performance artist, and she kind of like almost embodies these different animals, but in very like lo-fi settings. So there's like this really funny one of her as a moth in her house.
Okay.
Where she's just like bumping up against the light and stuff like that. Just like little gestures, I think, can be interesting in the kind of the medium of film. I was wondering when you were making the film, was it were you using your own body, or was that important to you?
Yeah, I was using my own body. It was important that it was a female body, I think that it was potentially maternal, but it was more out of necessity that it was definitely my own body. Like some of it was very difficult to shoot because I had to set up the camera and then be in front of the camera, or like it was during lockdown, like the strict time of lockdown, so I couldn't really get much help from anyone else during that. So but it's not necessarily important that it's me who is physically in the film, but it was important that it was a female, potentially maternal body that was representing the animal. And also, so initially my idea was that I was going to make a sculpture and I was going to create this animal. I had the idea for the animal before kind of the concept of the film, and I've been working with body casting, and so I'd already taken some casts of breasts from some friends when uni was still open. And I've been working with kind of latex and silicone and trying to make like kind of recreate it out of other materials. But in the film, I think it was important that it wasn't a prop that you saw, and that it was something that was actually kind of living and breathing, and then also referred to humans as well, because my idea and my design for this animal wasn't based on a specific animal in general, and it was important that it had human features to it, that it was this kind of monster, I suppose, made up of different, there was part human and part animal, and to sort of highlight the differences and the similarities between the two. Yeah.
Do you think going forward you'd want to work with the latex and the casting?
Maybe. I mean, yeah. My initial plan when I was back at WSA was that I was going to make some furniture. So I had some other sculptures, and they were quite kind of bodily and fleshy, and I was interested in that kind of like the visceral, like fleshiness when I was making physical objects, and that I was going to make furniture for people to sit on next to the objects, and I was going to cast the nipple cast that I'd taken and make bronze ones and put like them as buttons on the furniture. So that's super different from what I've ended up doing in this film, and I haven't really thought about how I might take that further, whether I want to pick up the physical sculptural materials again, or whether that should just be put to bed maybe for a bit and continue working with film. I'm not sure. I think I do still want to kind of explore what I can do with silicone and latex, because I haven't fully kind of experimented and worked out the limits and pushed it yet. So yeah, I think I probably want to push that a bit more, but I might give it a bit of time.
Yeah, it's good to decompress after after such a like an intense thing as a degree. Just like a final question for you, if you just say maybe a little bit about some of your influences.
Well, one artist who I really like the work of is an Australian artist, Patricia Piccinini. I don't know if you're familiar with her work. She makes very sort of hyper-realistic sculptures, and she kind of looks at the abject and orifices and our kind of aversion to seeing human orifices and bodily kind of features exposed, but she plays around with part human, part animal sculptures and the kind of uncanny, weird feeling that you get from seeing that kind of those things being mashed together. And she's also interested in what you were talking about earlier, talking about the artificial wombs and the kind of the lambs being involved in that. She's interested in science and how that kind of the manipulation of animals would happen in terms of like replacing organs for people who need organ transplants and growing ears on mice and stuff. She's kind of done work about that. So yeah, she's a big influence in my work. In terms of film and making my film, I read about haptic visuality and also Andrea Arnold's cinematography. Her kind of haptic use of cinematography was quite influential. So yeah, that's.
Oh yeah, great. Thank you so much. And actually, I just thought of a general reference for you all, especially in relation to this theme. I don't know if you know the curator and like art critic Charlie Fox. He's like quite young. He just recently did he created a show at Sadie Cole's and at Rodeo, and it was the Sadie Cole's one was called My Head is a Haunted House, and then the Rodeo one was I think it was like Wedding of Frankenstein or something like that. But he's kind of interested in these kind of themes, and like it's worth looking up because all of the work there was like super interesting, and it was like had like Mike Kelly, but also like Chaim Steinbach and Susan Beer, and yeah, it was really interesting work. But then it also like we were talking about like pop culture earlier, like he has like the floor of the show is like the floor from Twin Peaks. I don't know if you've seen it, but like there's the Red Lodge and there's this really iconic floor, and that's like the floor of the show. So it might be interesting to look at in terms of like, yeah, the broader theme, and also thinking about like obviously work's existing very kind of in a very digital sense now, but when I make work I often think a lot about how I want it to exist and how like it would exist ideally, and yeah, it might be interesting to see because it's a very nicely curated show, and he's also written a book called Young Monster, which is quite interesting. It's quite a short book, but it's quite a fun read. Yeah, I think that's. Should I hand back over to you, Gordon?
Yeah, thanks. Where are we in time? Do we have any questions from the virtual floor? I know that there's these little chats been going on, and I can't multitask, so I found that really tricky. So, does anyone just want to jump in with any questions?
Yeah, I'd like to. I mean, I think I pitched it in the chat, but I realise now it was probably quite a deep question to sort of throw out, whilst conversations were going on. So I'm still quite interested in all three artists' idea of that the unknown with the monster and human relation, and that sort of how the unknown sparks like a fear and excitement, but also like can also spark like a hallucinogenic idea of sort of what everyone's idea of a monster might be. So if that makes sense. I don't know if it's a key part of any of your practices or anything like that, this sort of not quite telling everything at face value, but leaving stuff purposely sort of subliminal in your work for people to delve into a bit more. I don't know, I just wanted to hear your thoughts about that sort of relationship.
I mean, when I was thinking about how I was going to make the film, I wanted to definitely make sure there was an element of unknown and ambiguity in there, like partly through the sort of the haptic cinematography and the I mean, I didn't have the animals, so I couldn't show the whole thing, and so it was important, from a practical point of view, to show just sort of small details, but also that it allowed an element to be left up to the viewer to sort of piece it together and to bring their own sort of subjective experience and ideas and let it evoke kind of their own thoughts and bring that to the piece. So yeah, I definitely didn't want to kind of lay it out and make it obvious. So yeah, that was important in terms of the making of the film, for sure.
Yeah,
yeah.
Oh, sorry.
You go first, Bianca. You go first.
Oh, thank you. No, yeah, I definitely see the fear of the unknown being something really big in my work, especially with the pool lamps one, because it wasn't anything distinct that I was afraid of. It was just looking at the object, just this like I'd have stare downs with the pool lamp sometimes, just being like, I don't know what it is, but there's something about it that just throws me off. And also like with some of the narratives that I do is like, as much as there is something going on, it might not always be clear, and I kind of like that in terms of where you can like come up with different like ideas of what is actually going on.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry.
I think the theme of the unknown was definitely key in my work. I mean, I think a couple of years ago, I watched this documentary on Netflix called like Myths and Monsters, and that directly talked about the unknown and how when you have landscapes or when you have animals that are unknown to humans, a fear kind of grows around it, and then you kind of emphasize features, and then you end up having this beast that lives there, and it's just beyond your borders of like human control and human civilization. And so it just becomes something monstrous. And I know from like where I live, it's like it's a working forest. It's ones that like people have gone into for like mines and like to take trees out and stuff. So it's very populated by people, but there's still a really unknown element to it. Like there was this myth, like a kind of modern myth, that there was a panther living in there, and that was kind of reported in all the local newspapers. It was really weird. And so I kind of like that element that even like in modern day, when we have all this technology, there's still parts of the world that are unknown and kind of always will be, which is why like it was a crucial setting for my film.
Yeah, going on with that, with like parts of the world, like a lot of the ocean isn't explored either. And even though I'm not afraid of the ocean, but like, you know, this kind of the unknown depths of things that exist is also kind of like very interesting. And also going on like with childhood fears, like as a child, you don't know much about the world and situations that happen to you. So like in the painting that where I bumped my head, of course, you know, the first thing I see is blood, and you immediately panic. You don't know what's going on. You don't know how severe the situation is. So this kind of fear of just not knowing what's happening or what's going to happen is just something really big as a kid. And so you always like think about that in kind of a very overwhelming situation.
Do you think that unknown thing? Sorry.
Oh, sorry, I was going to jump in there, but go ahead.
Go on, no.
Oh, I was just thinking about a question about so this whole theme of monsters and art making in a way is a way of shining light on this monster, and I was wondering how you think about your work's relation to art therapy, perhaps, and how that's a practice, and how, I don't know, how you feel your work relates to this kind of shining a light on the darkness inside or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm actually applying for art therapy as my master's this year. So I definitely think it's kind of, because for me, like, again, humor is very important. So I think like with using humor and very simple forms of like these kind of cartoon visual languages, you can really communicate a lot. And I think for a lot of the memories that I do convey, like they might look more terrifying, or there's like a lot more traumatic kind of undertones to it. So I think that could play a lot with like people trying to express like darker parts in their life without having to be too direct about it to bring up like, you know, bad memories. So I think that like with art, you can really communicate a lot without having to go to areas that you might not want to confront, or to confront areas through a better medium.
You have a lot of control over it, and
yeah,
you can do it in a way that's you know, right for you, and and others, and yeah.
Annette, you were going to say something, I think, as well.
Yeah, it was in relation to the last bit, but I've just thought of something else just in regards to art therapy and that idea that art may be a way to control your feelings. I kind of think art is obviously a different type of language, isn't it? So it would almost uncover maybe more than what you would ever be able to have in just like a language-based setting of like psychiatry. So I guess it links back to I think I'm really honing in on this idea of the unknown at the moment, but but that that's an interesting concept, the ways in which, you know, visual art or other types of art in art therapy might actually uncover maybe more of a monster than what you initially thought, or a different type of monster. Depends what you would define monster. I don't know. It's an interesting line of questioning.
Do you think the on of the unknown is, Freud would say it was a token of repression? So you're the monster at the bottom.
So I guess it's kind of, it also harks back at that idea that everything you see is just a mirror of yourself, isn't it, as well? So, but I guess so, because if you think of a monster, you think of the fears that you might personally have, and then I guess you do kind of project that onto this idea of a monster. But then I guess there's this questioning of how much are we conditioned to fear, like how much is taught to us that we should fear, in terms of that hybrid, that mixing of animals and humans, and that inherent, like
spiders in particular, like how in cartoons everyone runs away from spiders, and there's like, oh, that's what we have to do, we have to run away from them. Like, simple as that, I guess. But
and lots of other things, like the sort of the savagery of some sort of monsters. And I don't know, I looked recently into the how Western Europe regarded other like civilizations before they took over and colonized them. And a lot of the ways in which they described these past civilizations were sort of savagery, and again a link to animals, and then this sort of vibe of monstrousness. And that's an interesting thing in itself, I suppose. Like what would we regard as sort of something to be feared, or something with less or more intelligence, or stuff like that? I don't know. Sorry, I go off on one sometimes.
I suppose that relates to what Lily was saying about attitudes towards femininity, and also to animals and to nature, and they're all kind of lumped in together.
And like culture and power, I think, like, you know, I guess in this regard, you're talking about other humans to be animalistic, you know, for your own gain as one type of human to have power over others.
It's extremely subjective monster, isn't it? It's yeah, everyone has, you know, everyone's opinion of monster is, yeah, of course, different. And
but then also maybe sort of similar as well. I feel like if you were just to say a monster to people, I feel like there would be like really similar, maybe cliche visuals that pop into mind from all, like, you know, horror movies or media or stuff like that.
I think it's interesting what you were saying, Annette, about something to be feared as something with either less or more intelligence, as us or yourself, and kind of like the fact that we kind of, with animals, we can understand a lot of their body language, and with our pets and stuff, we kind of understand various emotions, and especially in mammals, we can kind of tell sort of sometimes how they're feeling. But then there's this also massive kind of fear of the unknown, in that we don't know how they perceive the world, we don't know what they think. And kind of years ago people thought that animals didn't sort of really feel pain, I think, or that they didn't, or certain things were justified anyway by saying that animals didn't feel pain, or that they weren't.
They also didn't think that babies felt pain either.
Or I mean, black people has been a big one, isn't it? Obviously, like, until sort of I think medical science based their ideas around that.
Yeah, and lots of I think Black women have been through terrible things in terms of not being given the right anesthetics and stuff, because it was believed, I think, during childbirth and things, it was believed that they didn't feel pain, or that they were stronger than white women, which was a weird thing to assume.
You'd think that screaming would be a big indicator that you're in pain. Or them saying, I'm in pain, help. No, you can't feel it.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of, I think it was the Babadook, that movie, which was a really weird one. Have you guys watched it? Yeah, and actually by the end of it, it's an interesting one in that it sort of shows the emotional side of the monster itself at the end, and then they actually keep it as a pet or something. Sorry for spoilers and everything, but keep it as a pet at the end. But you sort of have you look at the monster in a new light by the fact that it actually has emotions itself, and it's a living thing almost. That was something that really because you don't think of it, do you, when you think of a monster? You just think of your fear and your fight or flight or whatever.
Also reminds me of this horror movie. I haven't watched it personally, but I heard of it. I think it's called The Canker Man. And like, again, to spoil it, it's basically the boy's manifestation of cancer, because cancer took his mom. And so he kind of thought cancer was a person, and it kind of haunts him.
I think I've seen that.
It looks like a puppet figure, I think. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Doesn't he overcome it though in the end?
I think so. I'm not sure, because what I watched was like a review of it, so I was like, oh, okay.
I really enjoy these the mediums where they make friends with the monster. It's just like, yeah, that's kind of what we should do, really. Like get to know it, like know what that monster is, like, and yeah, be at peace with it, or maybe have a dialogue with it.
I think that's definitely like quite present in like modern children's story, like the friendly monster, especially like Where the Wild Things Are.
Oh yeah.
I had another point, but I've forgotten it.
Any more questions, or should we sum up now? Any more questions or comments, rather? I mean, the problem, in a way, it's a good problem. This kind of topic can really go on forever. It's been going on for forever already.
Yeah, there's been some amazing kind of comments, Gordon, and everyone. So I sort of think I would be I've tried to start writing a text a little bit like Annette, and thought there were too many kind of subjects in one, but I've kind of really enjoyed the connections between them, and I kind of was trying to think how to sort of think of them as exaggerations, I guess. So they're exaggerations, whether that's from the animation to make something animate to make it larger. So this becomes about giganticism. But then it was like this partial thing happening in Lily's that I was so interested in. So the partial capturing of the landscape, and then the partial capturing of the figure in the landscape, the animal in the landscape. So it was kind of really interesting how this partiality and animation and exaggeration kind of started to kind of run a thread through. It made me really think about, because you mentioned it a few times about the private and the public, and the sort of sense of, well, if you partially capture a kind of creature, you're partially capturing a body. So you're thinking of that as being a private space. If you're partially then capturing a landscape, you're partially capturing this kind of this space which is public. So you've got this kind of thing between the private kind of stuff and then the public narratives, these grand narratives and the private narratives. And that seems to be running through lots of your kind of discussions. So it's kind of really, really fascinating. But I mean, the only thing I would kind of ask, which maybe you haven't done, is kind of trying to work a question out of all of this, which I don't necessarily have, but I'd just be so interested in what Cara thought about Lily's film and what Lily's take on Cara's was. But because I kind of thought there were just so many kind of crossovers in a great way. But if we've got time to do that, I would be so interested in that. But other than that, there was these wonderful kind of like relations between all of the stuff. So I just wanted to say that anyway.
Okay, great, thanks.
Yeah, when I saw Lily's video, I was a bit like, it was weird because it was like we were communicating over video, but that we'd independently done it. I think one of the things that I really love about the film that Lily did was what you were saying, Ian, is about like the partial view of the animal, that you kind of can't really see what it is, and so then it becomes unknown, and then in that way it kind of becomes more monstrous. I think that she kind of pulled that off really well. I was a bit like, kind of wish I did a similar thing, but I think with my monster it was a bit more absurd, a bit more crude, so it kind of took up the whole shot. And I think the unknown element for me was like the woods. I don't know how Lily feels.
I really liked your film, Kiara. I think I watched it first time without the sound, actually, which gave it a very, very different feel to it. It was much kind of, it was more wild, I think, without the sound, because
the
sound is a very kind of like happy, jolly summer's day kind of.
The sound is definitely a very human element because it came from Morris Men.
Yeah, the bells were dancing.
That was something I was trying to explore, was that I thought it was kind of obvious that underneath the costume there was a person, and I thought maybe I had to definitely address the fact that it is a human trying to become animal, whereas I think yours was definitely animal with hints of human. I don't know if you know what I mean.
For sure, I think, and it is obvious that yours is animalistic with a human inside the costume, doing kind of animal-ish, sort of animal and human kind of movements and gestures, and I really liked the bit about with the yarn that was kind of like loose yarn that had come off and was laid over some of the branches, just like you'd find kind of sheep wool naturally or wherever, kind of, but it was bright pink and synthetic instead of just sort of kind of like a natural color, which kind of represented for me the, like, it's like an animal, but it's actually human, and it's left this human.
Yeah, it's like linking to the falseness and the fictional element of it. Whereas I think with your fur, it was so physical, so tactile. It was like, I don't know, it just felt really real. And when a monster becomes real, it becomes, I don't know, I'm trying to work out how to say this. You know it's digital, you know that it's fabricated, but because of the texture of it, it feels more real, feels like it could exist within the real world. And I think that makes your animal more authentic, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, thank you. I think that is also the difference conceptually between our work, in that, like, you're directly addressing mythologies and stories and narratives, and something that has been constructed, and yeah, I'm sort of trying to talk about something that is really real, that people don't look at or ignore or don't think about, kind of the opposite.
Yeah, totally agree.
Okay, this has been really, really interesting. I've really loved it. I mean, seeing these connections that have emerged between all of the work. There's just too many ideas. It was like firing millions of ideas off as I was listening to you. And yeah, it really shows the importance of seeing your work in relation to other people, of like how hugely generative that is. And yeah, thanks, Amy. That was fantastic. Really, really great questions. Really brought out a lot of information. Some really helpful suggestions as well. I think this was really fascinating to listen to. A really great start to the whole symposiums, I think. So just want to thank you all for fantastic discussion, fantastic work, and our wonderful discussants who really kept it moving.
Oh yeah, thank you all. It was really great to see the work. It was very exciting. Could definitely have chatted about it for an awful lot longer. If anyone wants to talk to me about anything, I'm always available. You can just message me on Instagram.
Thanks.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Do you want to say anything, John, before we?
No, only thank you, Gordon. well done. And to echo everything you've just said, thank you, Amy. And we'll meet here again at 2 o'clock.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Okay, bye.